And we are going to start the recording now.
I think we're at 9 o'clock, Dion, so we'll begin.
We're ready.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the February 24th, 2021 virtual Zoom meeting of the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission. We have a short meeting today, but we will begin with our Pledge of Allegiance. Dion, could you execute that for me, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dion. Next in our order is Laura. Could you execute a roll call, please, to make sure we have a quorum for today's meeting? Are you there, Laura?
Yes, sorry, I couldn't get unmuted there. Adams,
Present.
Lecca,
Present.
Garcia,
Oh,
Haskett,
Here.
Hauser.
Here.
May,
present.
Phillips,
Here.
Schaefer,
Here.
Touchton,
Present.
Vardy,
Present.
Chair McDaniel.
Present.
You have a full quorum.
Thank you very much. Before I move to item 2, you'll note on the agenda, it's called the Commission Workshop today. We are in need of input on some specific items and to provide some direction, but we are also very time constrained today. So we have about 3 hours. We've got a lot to get through, and we have some public comment period, which will consume about half of the meeting. So when you look at all that together, I'm going to ask everyone, both the commissioners, the agency staff, as well as the public, to please stay crisp and short as you can on the topical matter so that we can actually get to this, because I know with regards to both staff and some commissioners, we really have a hard stop very close to 12 o'clock. So with that in mind, let's move to agenda item 2. And I will turn over to Dan Prinsloo, the Director of CPW.
Morning. Thank you, Chairman. Commissioners, good morning. Welcome to our February workshop. So I'm going to do 3 quick things. I know in your packet we sent out, I discussed at our last meeting about a letter that I've requested from our partners at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service about the wolf and Proposition 114. So I'm just going to read that real quick. It's fairly short, but really for the public to hear that, since the commissioners got that. So addressed to me, dear Mr. Prinsloo, on November 3rd, 2020, Colorado voters approved Proposition 114, Colorado Gray Wolf Reintroduction Initiative, directing reintroduction of gray wolves into Colorado. On the same day, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service published a final rule, 85 FR 69778, to remove gray wolves from the list of endangered and threatened wildlife in those areas of the lower 48 United States where they are federally listed, with the exception of the Mexican wolf. This rule delisted wolves in Colorado and became effective on January 4th, 2021, at which time the state of Colorado assumed management authority of gray wolves under their jurisdiction. Colorado Parks and Wildlife has laid out a strategy to implement implement Proposition 114 and implement the reintroduction plan by December 31, 2023. The service has scientific and technical experience in planning reintroduction and management programs for the conservation of numerous species, including gray wolves. Although gray wolves are not currently federally protected, the service is committed to partnering with the state to ensure the agency's statutory requirements related to wolf reintroduction and management in the state are met. The service is also willing and able to provide our scientific knowledge and experience related to gray wolf reintroduction, recovery, and management by participating as members of the technical team if requested. If we are also available to explore management options should gray wolves become federally protected in Colorado in the future. If the service can be of any assistance and any questions you'd like to discuss this matter in greater detail, please contact Steve Small, Assistant Regional Director of Ecological Services, signed Matt Hogan, Deputy Regional Director. So just thought that would be helpful to read on. We've had no less than 4 or 5 meetings with the Fish and Wildlife Service discussing about 10J and pre-listing 10Js as we've discussed, and we'll continue with those discussions with our partners. Second, for me, is just a real quick update on our request for proposal for facilitators. So it is on the street, effective February 22nd, 21, was posted on the network called VSS. I'm just going to read just some timelines, not going to get into detail. Obviously, it's asking for significant facilitation for this whole process. So that, again, RFP was posted. The inquiry deadline for written questions is due March 5th. Answers posted to VSS March 10th. Submission deadline March 19th. Evaluation of proposals would be March 22nd through April 5th. And the project award estimate would be about April 6th. Project start date time would be May 1. I would tell you for a state large facilitation bid, that's astronomically fast, as fast as we can pull it off with state rules. And third, and if somebody could help me with some PowerPoints, I'm going to just real quick. I only have 2 pictures, so I'm going to keep us going quickly. In early January 2021, a gray wolf, collared wolf, had been observed with M1084, the black wolf that had been in northern Colorado since 2019. On February 1, 2021, CPW staff and a helicopter contractor captured and collared a male wolf, the one that was with the black wolf. CPW staff, including Eric Odell, Species Conservation Program Manager, and Pauline Knoll, Wildlife Veterinarian, were there. The animal was estimated to be about 4 years old. The animal weighed 109 pounds. Typical measurement data were collected. Wolf was in good body condition. After coming out of sedation, M2101, which is the new one, joined back up with M1084, which was the black wolf out of the Snake River herd in Wyoming that's been in Colorado. Staff from Terrestrial Wildlife Health in both Northeast and Northwest regions were instrumental in all tasks related to this effort. Last but not least, after we put a collar, if you can go to the next slide, after we put a collar on this wolf, they again paired back up and they've been in Colorado ever since. So there was lots of discussion about Wyoming. These wolves are fully in Colorado. So just thought that would be a good update. We did do a press release, as probably most people saw, but there's lots of speculation about what wolf were we talking about and new wolves, etc. So be helpful so you can see it and hear directly on what actually happened. So with that, Chairman, that is my brief update.
Thank you, Director Prenslow. I see I have anyone who has questions or comments for Director Prenslow on the items he presented. I see Commissioner Garcia.
Yes, thank you, Director. Just a quick question. I was looking on the website. I don't see the RFP. Would it be possible to just get us a copy? Not the responses, but just the RFP. So people ask us, what are you looking for? I've got it.
Great question. I appreciate that very much, Commissioner Garcia. And yes, I will send that out. Wanted to wait for this meeting so we could discuss it before I send it out. So I will send that out at the close of this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Touchton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Garcia, you haven't noticed that I got a haircut in response to your concerns at our last meeting. Back to the topic at hand, Dan. It's wonderful that the Fish and Wildlife Service indicated that they would help us in our efforts. Their response, though, is a little unclear. What I would like to see, or I think maybe the public would like to see as well, is what specifically we've asked them for. They said, we're happy to help, but I'd like to know, like, what have we told them what we need from them?
Yeah, well, we've told them we would like either a 10J or a pre-listing 10J, which, as you well know, does not exist. We've been asking for that for 5 years for wolverines. So I believe administration change might change the discussion on pre-listing. And we've also asked them for detail on the other mechanisms under the Endangered Species Act that will, safeguard, quite frankly, the state of Colorado, in the event that wolves are relisted in the future. So any and all of those.
Thank you, Commissioner Touchton. Any other questions for Director Prenslow? Seeing none, I think we're ready to move to the next item. The only thing I'd add, Director Prenslow, is I really appreciate your optimism on meeting this schedule. I think that, to your comment, is going to be tough. And also, really critical that we really get a good project manager, facilitator. This project is obviously very important to our state, so let's get the best one we can. With that in mind, we'll move to agenda item number 3. We have Reed DeWalt, who has a very long title as Assistant Director of Aquatic, Terrestrial, and Natural Resources. And he's got the next 3 items for discussion. These are all listed as A, or action items, in your agenda, but I just wanted to explain that very briefly. We will not be asking for a motion for any of these items. There is no motion that goes with that. It is listed as action because it's not just informational to you. The staff will be listening for input and some direction from the commissioners. I'm very interested in your feedback on these items so they can continue to move forward at this preliminary stage of the project. So that's why they're listed as A, but there won't be, or should not be, any motions that are required out of it. So any questions on that? Seeing none, I will turn the floor over to Reed. He will first begin with the discussion of the commission education session. So Reed, floor is yours. You're still muted. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Commissioners, Executive Director Gibbs and Director Prenslow, and everyone else. It's good to be with you again and have this opportunity to continue to work on the planning structure, the implementation of Proposition 114. I should note that you'll see multiple staff on this call as well, and there may be times when we defer to them for answers or not, but I hope to handle most of the conversation as we go forward. So before I begin, I just want to remind everybody kind of what the purpose of our public involvement strategies are. I said this at the last meeting, but I think it's good to keep our purpose in front of us as we continue through this process. So really there's 4 things outlined in our purpose. The first one is to share information to build public awareness and promote engagement across the state. The second one would be to collaborate with technical experts and stakeholders to share knowledge and draft management and conservation strategies. The third one is to foster commitment and collaboration toward plan implementation. And then the fourth one would be to design and implement an inclusive and transparent process to meet the requirements outlined in Proposition 114. So the 3 topics I'm going to cover today, and the one that Assistant Director Versteeg is going to cover, are going to help us meet that purpose, as well as put some more structure and meat on the bones of what we presented at the last meeting. There may be times when I refer back to the memo that Director Prenslow sent out, and that's just kind of a reminder of our purpose and some of the things that we said at the last meeting. And I do hope to clarify some of the things that people may be confused about, so that we're clear as to moving forward. So with that, I'll get into the first item under this agenda topic, and that is this idea of an educational session. We presented that last meeting, and it wasn't really clear, and we continued to gather information around it. So would like to talk to you about this. And what the purpose of this educational session or sessions would be to educate the commission, as well as begin kind of an input process on specific topics of interest. And I'm going to go through those topics of interest here in a minute. But the real purpose is not to make the commission subject matter experts. We have those subject matter experts on staff, and if we need to, we can definitely reach out to others who have paved this road before us, and that is definitely our intent. So our intent with the commission is to kind of give you the terminology and the words and some of the ideas around wolf planning and wolf reintroduction, so that when we go into some more of the meetings that you understand the language and some of the basic concepts. But in no means is this going to be a PhD level program to get the commissioners all up to speed on everything related to wolves, but more of a high level educational series. Another purpose of this series would be to educate the public and to inform the public on some important topics, increase buy-in in our process, and then to increase trust in the agency. And I think that is really important as we go through this as well, is that people view the agency in a good light and have a good amount of trust for us as the professionals, professional wildlife managers for the state of Colorado. So these meetings, as we're envisioning them, and this is some of the information we'd like to discuss with you, would be sort of a different type of meeting than you're used to. They would, what we're proposing is that we would do them online for now, but they would be educational in nature. There would not be a lot of back and forth. We would reach out to experts in the field of the particular topic and ask them to present from their opinion, their experience, and their understanding to the commission. A lot of these people will be folks from outside the agency. There may be a few folks within the agency, but really we're seeking some outside voices to help us as we work on our planning commitment here. So to do that, we propose to set these up as a webinar type of style and either do those in the evening for a couple hours or attach them to a commission meeting sort of at the end as an educational component. So that's sort of the structure of what we anticipate. This isn't a debate forum in any means. It's more just an educational series from experts in this field. So some of the topics that we've heard from all of you through the just various conversations we've had over the last couple of months, I'll go through those just so we're on the same page. And then if there's more that the commission thinks we need to add, definitely open to that. So right now I have 4 topics that we feel would be important. The first one would be the wolf depredation and livestock conflicts, and just to have a general understanding around that. We do see our game damage program talking about our current structure, Colorado Department of Agriculture possibly having a role, other states game damage coordinators or damage coordinators, excuse me, and possibly other who have experience in this. By no means am I limiting the speakers by saying these names. So we would talk with agricultural producers from other states, and as I said, other state damage program administrators, learn from other states on their experiences, both on the ground and from agency standpoints. And then we could also talk about some of the tools in the toolbox for damage prevention and some of the ideas out there. And there are a lot of ideas out there, both lethal and non-lethal. And I think folks would really benefit from having an open education component on that. We could also talk about some of the psychological impacts to producers in the communities where wolves are present, just so we have a full understanding of the impacts of wolves on the ground. The second topic we would like to talk about would be wolf management. And we definitely, again, we'd learn from other states, Fish and Wildlife Service, Park Service, and others who have firsthand experiences. We could talk about impacts on ungulates, impacts on other species, costs that have been incurred by other states, how other states have monitored wolves and their prey, and then also other management ideas that other states have undertaken or are currently working on. The third one would be the idea of reintroduction efforts in other states, excuse me. So other states who have done this before, and some of that would be like, where did they get their wolves? Where do they release them? How many? What kind of adaptive management have they done around that? How do they pay for their processes? Have there been successes or failures that we should be aware of? Was this a phase type of program, or was there other ways they implemented it? And what were their overall goals? And then how did they communicate this through their processes? And I think those discussions would be helpful. And then the fourth idea we've heard from all of you is this discussion of disease issues, chronic wasting disease impacts, high data disease, and other disease related issues around wolves and their presence on the landscape, both from a pro and con perspectives. So those are the four main topics that we've heard from the commission, but would definitely like to know if we've missed the mark and we need to add additional topics to that. We would also like to propose that we start this education tour soon. What we've noticed is that if we're not doing things and being forward facing with this wolf discussion, others will fill that void and assumptions will run wild. So I think our intent would be to do this soon in the next couple months and get this type of educational series done by the time the facilitator is on board. This isn't something that we would continue to do for years and years and years. There'd be these main topics that we would complete and then move on to more of a listening part of the components. And so with that, I'll stop. That's kind of where we wanted to present and give this idea just to clarify around what these educational sessions look like, and turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair, for discussion.
Thank you, Reed. I think it's a great plan, especially the timing and what you think you can accomplish. The only comment I wanted to add is that, these educational sessions, and I didn't hear you mention it, but if you did, excuse me for repeating it, is that these education sessions are not meant to relitigate issues. They're meant to educate and bring us forward, bring all the understanding of the commissioners and the public forward, and see how that impacts the ultimate plan that's put forward and approved here in our state. So with that, I have a number of hands. I will begin with Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, Chair. Reed, good work. So I didn't see anything that I would add to your list. I was just curious, in terms of having gone through this, for instance, with Amendment 64, we were one of the first states to go through this recreational marijuana. And so we were kind of a guinea pig. And I guess we're in the same boat here. We're one of the first, not the first, but have we reached out, or can we reach out to those that have done this? I say this because Amendment 64, again, I spent way too much time on that. But one thing I did learn was there were a lot of questions that we wish we had asked, a lot of things we wish we had known that we didn't. And maybe we could have done a better job in trying to reach out. But certainly other states that followed us came back to us and said, okay, what did you wish you had known? What do you wish you had asked? And so the same framework, is there some way we have done that or that we can do that? Because again, we're new at this, and I see us down the road going, oh, I wish I would have asked this. I wish I had known this, etc.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Any comments or response, Reed?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And the answer to that is yes, and we are continuing to do that. So we earlier this fall, we completed kind of our own internal listening tour with all the states that have wolves, and especially in the Western United States, a lot of our neighbors. And we had this very discussion for 3 or 4 hours at a time for multiple states. And so we've done that. We've talked with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and we continue to have those conversations. So the answer is yes, we've done that. And we asked that specific question you asked, is like, what don't we know, and what would you do different if you did this over? And so we've had that, and that would be one of the sessions I'm trying to describe that we would bring to the commission and have that ability to hear from some other states.
Thank you, Reed. Commissioner Phillips.
right, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Reed, for that presentation. Just a few comments and kind of echoing what Commissioner Garcia just said, and I heard it in your presentation as well. I think some of our biggest resources are our not only neighboring states, but states who have been managing wolves for a while now. Hearing some of their direct successes and non-successes stories, I think will help us a lot, avoid a lot of pitfalls, and hopefully make things as smooth as possible. My next comment would be online meetings is tough. I know there's a lot of people in ag, and I'm sure around that aren't completely tech savvy. A lot of us have adapted to it, sometimes begrudgingly, but we're getting better at it. Just making sure those meetings are planned out well in advance, and I assume they would be recorded, but just making sure they're recorded. You know, we're in calving season right now for a lot of people, so having the meetings in the evening would be helpful. But there's a lot of guys that are out, you know, almost 24 hours a day checking things. So making sure they are recorded, or they're you know, they're typed up, or some way to access if people can't make it to the meetings. Those are my two comments. Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner Phillips. Commissioner Touchton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me just say I second what Duke just said on the recording and making these things as available as possible. What I'd like to suggest, in addition, is citations. I tend to be a fact checker by nature. I've seen a lot of people in the public comments say directly contradictory things. You know, person A says X, person Y says Z, and sometimes they have citations, sometimes they don't. But I think in our own work with the public, we should give citations of where we got any fact we assert, so that they can go check it for themselves and see if it's accurate. And the other point I wanted to make is I found in the public comment, I thought 3 excellent letters that did this type of fact-checked citation-driven work. They're basically from pages 56 to 62 in the last batch of public comment. And they're from our 2 local universities, University of Colorado and University Colorado State, from professors. I thought they did Professor Lambert at CU, Professor Emeritus Noon at CSU, giving us real facts and footnotes. And so with this educational series for both ourselves and for the public, I would like us to involve, if possible, our 2 universities, Colorado and Colorado State. I think that would, you know, it's a state-driven process. I think they're the right people to look to for expertise. And at least as I've seen their letters so far, I can double check their facts, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner Touchton. Commissioner Haskett.
Thank you, Chairman McDaniel. Thank you, Reed, for a great presentation. I do echo what Commissioner Phillips and Touchton said. I think we need to be very careful about making this accessible to all. There are a lot of ranchers that do not have internet, do not even have a computer, probably, unfortunately, as we found with drawing stuff. I do have a couple comments, and you're probably covering these, but I just want to make sure. One of the things in the presentations or seminars that the Rocky Mountain Wolf Project did was talk to livestock owners about, you know, you can train your cattle, you can do this. Why I don't necessarily agree with all of that. There's talk of like penning livestock and things, and I want to make sure that we work with the U.S. Forest Service, because that's not allowed, and we need to have presentations to our livestock owners of how they can, you know, decrease predation and what they're allowed to do, and if we're working with those agencies to make sure that that does happen. And the other one was wildlife significantly changed their behavior. And and their patterns. I'd like to see that explained in one of our seminars just to help the public. It's probably on your list, but just want to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Haskett. Commissioner Blacka.
Thank you. I just wanted to make kind of, dovetail onto what everybody else was saying. I think if we have these programs in the evening, we would have more participation. I know I personally would be more into it, but I think that frees up a lot of time. I know that our Sportsman Caucus's meetings have been in the evening, and there's been a lot of participation in those in the last few months. And then I, just so you know, maybe put it out there, if there are avenues of communication that we're overlooking with regards to accessing like the agricultural community, maybe we should bring that forward as producers, people that we talk to. Maybe we can bring ideas to the agency as to help them, fill those gaps, I guess is what I'm saying. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Blacka. Commissioner Adams.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Reed, for a very helpful and informative presentation. I had some questions about if we've considered or if there were any conversations around having differentiated education sessions by stakeholder type. And I asked that because although I've appreciated all of the topics that were outlined, I do believe there are specific issues that that could be addressed by specific stakeholder types. So for example, there could potentially be a session that's specific to the agricultural community, another for hunting and fishing, another for non-consumptive users. I was even thinking about a session, or if you'd all considered a session for educators in P16 or P is preschool through 12th grade. I was thinking there's a lot of implications around just how are we educating our young people, right, about wolves. So this is a really great opportunity to leverage some of those existing partnerships that we have. But just so my question is, was there any considerations around having educational sessions that are specific to stakeholder type where we can dive more deeply? And I ask because I have some concerns that if it is lumped together, all stakeholders, that some stakeholder concerns may not be adequately addressed. I'm specifically thinking about the agricultural community, as others have raised, and really want to make sure that they have the depth, the time to ask all the ag kind of related questions and not take over the conversation from some of the other stakeholders. So that's my first question. And then I just had some general comments I wanted to add on to Commissioner Tuxton's comment around engaging our universities. And I would add our local community colleges as well, recognizing that knowledge is not just housed in our larger universities, and that our community colleges are oftentimes a place. And then lastly, how can we leverage our existing convening, like Partners in the Outdoors Conference and other conferences that convene some of these stakeholders, and perhaps having some conference sessions there. So we're not always asking our public to come to us, but we are actually going to some of the different convenings that these different stakeholders already have. So yeah, a comment, and then to my question about differentiated sessions by stakeholder type. Thank you.
See, you have your hand up, Reed. Would you like to respond, please?
Yeah, thank you. All great questions and comments. And I'll just add a couple clarifying things. And I forgot to mention that we fully expect to record these sessions and place them on our website for a resource for being used at any time and accessible at any time. So that's our intent. And so I appreciate the commissioners reminding me of that. Commissioner Adams, specifically to a couple of your questions, we're working right now with the Colorado Department of Agriculture and Colorado State University Extension offices. And we actually had a meeting with those guys last week on some of these educational components to agriculture and livestock producers and folks in that community. We feel that's extremely important. So some of what I've just discussed was more education to all of you, but don't feel like we're not working on other things. As far as educating our students and K-12 or that crowd, I know that Lauren Truitt's office, which houses our education section, is currently working on a curriculum for those students that we can take out from a CPW perspective and start to educate the future generations. That's in its very early stages, but I do know that we're working on that as well. We've received hundreds of requests from schools to have staff present, and it's actually overwhelming to think of that. So we're presenting a curriculum that can be kind of shipped out to different educators and used that way. And as far as the universities, we just, as a matter of business, constantly work with those universities, sort of behind the scenes, and maybe we take it for granted more than we need to, and make it more public that we do work with those universities on a continual basis, because they are a tremendous resource. So I think I'm
sorry, just a point of clarification, Reed. Did you say, you said universities, and I was speaking specifically to community colleges? Curious if that relationship already exists with them as well.
You know, I'm not as sure on the community colleges, but I do know that on the local level, those conversations happen. I just don't happen to have those personally, but I could reach out to more of a local community level and make sure that we're having those conversations. I just don't know that directly myself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reed. Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Let's go forward to Commissioner May.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm only going to say what nearly everybody else has said, but it's so important to me that I need to reiterate it. And I think the focus of our education and outreach needs to include the people who have the most cost, and the people who are going to be the most affected by this plan, the people who bear the burden of the negative impacts. We have to use the best science to mitigate any and all conflicts. And I think to do that, we need to hold in-person meetings in every area that's really impacted. We have to do it as often and as soon as we possibly can. And of course, that's going to be going into the far reaches of the states where this is going to happen. And I know that we plan on doing that, but I just want to emphasize that I think it's important that we focus on in-person as soon as possible, because there are many people, and it's been mentioned by Commissioner Phillips and some others, that just don't have the ability to travel, that in order to take care of their livelihoods, they have to be close. And I think it's much more expedient for us to go to them rather than to ask them to come to us. I really applaud the efforts to reach into the school systems and try to help young people understand what's going on. I just want to emphasize that it's highly important that the right message is put out there, that we don't allow any special interests to overwhelm those conversations, and that the education that we do provide is unbiased and objective. And I'm sure our highly professional staff will make sure that that happens. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner May. I'm going to move to Commissioner Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. Good to see you, Mr. DeWalt. Couple of questions. So I wanted to make sure that we clarified the intent of these sessions, because the intent or the goal, I think, informs the curriculum process, all of those. As I understand it, it's to make sure there's a baseline of understanding amongst the commissioners of here are the baselines of the basic 101s in regards to these topic areas regarding wolves. Is that a correct characterization, Assistant Director?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Schaefer. Yes, that's definitely correct, but I don't think we should leave with the assumption that that's the only education that the agency is involved in.
Right. I wanted to just make certain that we're thinking about it for the initial, at least, desired purposes, so that we're designing it. Because I think the educational aspects of this initiative and this process is going to be something that is going to have to be constant and ongoing, in different venues and sort of different methods. And kind of going back to the educational component with us, is there a way to ensure that we have a sort of iterative process on setting the agenda for these so that we're not necessarily missing any big questions that commissioners might have that want to be addressed, or they want to make certain that the public is educated upon or hear some perspectives upon. So if we could get, the draft agenda as you guys are designing it, I think that would be great. So I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Commissioner Schaefer. I have, let's see, Charlie wants a second bite at the apple, but before I turn the floor over to him, we really do need to get to public comment. So I'd ask Charlie if we could make her pretty quick if you can, please. So Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you. Very quickly, I just wanted some direction, Reed. And I think, thank you, Commissioner Schaefer. These are webinars directed at the commission. They're for our educational purposes, I think was my understanding when you started out this conversation. And these are not directed at the public. Do you envision these being public meetings where we're going to have interactive, which would involve the public, or are these simply educational webinars directed at us without being interactive and without public comment?
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Our intent right now is for, as you said, for this to be directed at the commission for your education. Obviously, it can be consumed by anybody if we record it, and we would invite the public to listen in and recommend that. We don't anticipate public comment at this time. And what we're really trying to avoid is to have our guests have to debate this with folks. And we're inviting folks to give their information and experiences to the commission. And obviously the public could provide comment through the regular process, but we don't envision a back and forth with our guests here. These will be experts in their field that will present to the commission from their viewpoint.
That's helpful. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you very much. With that, I think we're ready to move to public comment. Katie, are you ready to administer that?
Yes, thanks, Chair McDaniel. So we had 8 members of the public sign up for comment on this item. Currently, I have 5 logged into Zoom. We'll keep an eye out if the others join. Because of the high volume, we're limiting everyone to 2 minutes. I will call out who's up and then who will be next, so you can be prepared. We will unmute you, ask if you'd like your camera on, and then once you're ready to go, we'll start the timer. I'll give a notice when there are 15 seconds left, and when you hit 2 minutes, we will go ahead and mute your line, and then we'll turn over to the chair to see if there are any questions. Otherwise, we'll keep moving on. So up first on this item, we have Erica Moore, who will be followed by Karen Mahuna. So we'll get Erica unmuted. And Erica, would you like your camera on?
Yes.
All right, just a moment. You might have to hit accept on your end. All right, Erica, we see you. So we'll go ahead and start your time.
Good morning, Erica, and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Erica Moore. I am from Colorado Springs. I am one of the majority of Colorados that voted for Proposition 114. And as it has been touched on by a few of you so far, I just wanted to reiterate that holding educational programs, I think, is very important, both for the commission as well as for the general public. But also wanted to point out that these programs should not be held in a way that it slows down or delays the development of this restoration and management plan. And I do think it is important that we have education programs focused on those Western Slope counties that are going to be more impacted by this restoration. And we can use information both from our colleges and universities as well as other states for those carnivore coexistence programs. My one concern about following programs from other states and how they manage wolves is such as Montana, who just passed bills to allow the use of snares, as well as trapping seasons being extended and opening up hunting on pregnant wolves. And I don't think that the Coloradans who voted for this proposition would be in favor of using such lethal management techniques, and that we should look more towards states who have positive views on wolves and their restoration. I thank you guys for your time. That's all I have.
Thank you, Erica. I don't see any questions. So with that, Katie, we can move to the next public comment.
Sure. So up next, we'll have Karen Mahuna, and I'm starting to see our previous folks who are signed up pop in. So after Karen, we'll have Terry Fankhauser.
Thank you.
Karen, would you like your camera on?
Sure. Yeah,
All
that's
right.
fine.
You may have to hit accept on your end.
Okay.
Okay, Karen, you're ready to go.
Good morning. Welcome.
Morning. Thank you, Chairman McDaniels and commissioners, for this opportunity to comment today. My name is Corinne Mahuna. I live in Colorado Springs and also voted to pass Proposition 114. As you consider developing your educational program, I believe it is critical that you include science-based educational presentations by wolf biologists that have been involved with prior wolf reintroductions. This would give commissioners, CPW staff, and the public access to professionals with hands-on experience and expertise. It would also free up CPW staff to begin work on the wolf reintroduction plan and prevent unnecessary delays so that the wolves could be reintroduced by the end of 2022. Considering all the false information and hyperbole that has been thrown about on social media, as well as on television, radio, and news programs, it is imperative to introduce the real wolf and his or her niche in the ecosystem, as has been previously done in the Yellowstone National Park educational programs. How Colorado will benefit from wolves needs to be addressed. In addition, coexistence strategies that can be implemented to prevent conflict and non-lethal management needs to be addressed by experts in those fields. I've also found that recent legislative efforts in Montana, Idaho, and Wisconsin to drastically reduce their wolf populations to be deeply disturbing. The actions in these states, like those of certain groups in Colorado, are hate-based and political with no scientific or economical data to support them. This is speciesism, the belief that some species are more important than others, that some animals like wolves, coyotes, and fox are trash and can be treated as such. Racism and speciesism are related. It's small wonder that Idaho and Montana are as well known for their hate groups as they are for their horrendous wildlife laws. Colorado has to be better, and that starts with leadership. Governor Polis has stepped up, and now it is time for you to do so, beginning with an educational program that is fair and based on the best available science.
Thank you, Karen. I don't see any questions. So with that, Katie, I think we're moving forward to Mr. Fankhauser.
Yep, we'll have Terry Fankhauser followed by Matt Barnes. Terry, would you like your camera on?
Sure, that's fine. Thank you. Number one, I'd like to say, excuse me, sorry about that. Number one, I'd like to say thank you to the commission and the staff of the Parks and Wildlife. You're certainly undertaking above and beyond what is a significant workload to be a very significant issue that you're going to have to present in a very balanced and thoughtful way as it relates to wildlife management in Colorado. Just a couple observations. As far as the body of information that you're going to cover, I think it's important to make sure that as you talk about wolf conflict with livestock, you're not only looking at direct impacts which is depredation, but more importantly, those indirect impacts. And I know you're thinking about this, but costs do travel to producers related to decreased gestation, weight loss, land use, breed back, additional time and labor. Another point that I think is important to cover is more along the lines of introduced wolf biology as it relates to potential conflicts between wolves that have freely migrated to Colorado and wolves that will be introduced. They're apex predators that are very territorial. And I know that we don't want to impact those native wolves that are now living in Colorado through an introduced population that ultimately will have significant conflict amongst themselves. So a bit of learning from other states, I think, is going to be important related to behavior and things along those lines. The other thing that we're hearing from some of our members that are really economically disadvantaged in certain areas of the state, like and I won't go into geographies of these areas, but we're hearing from a fairly dispersed.
Thank you, Terry. And appreciate it. Do we have any questions? Oh, we do. Commissioner May, I didn't see your hand. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask Mr. Fankhauser if he anticipates that if we have these meetings in more remote areas of the state, we'll have a more appropriate response to any of these conflicts that come about, and how he would recommend that that was done.
Thank you for the question, and that was the point that I was attempting to make, and I appreciate the time limit. But yes, I do think that that's important. I also think it's important to get into some communities with lower populations, certainly those areas that have economic implications based on employment, based on income, and really understand what the implications might be to those communities. And I think that can only be done through in-person meetings in many ways, as well as a higher level of frequency meetings of meetings to get those individuals' input.
Thank you, Mr. Fankhauser.
Thank you. I do have another question. Commissioner Adams.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much. Terry, I hate to bring you back on, but did have a question about, you mentioned frequency, and I was curious what you meant by frequency. So that was one of the questions. I know we talked about ongoing, but what is frequent enough? What is too frequent, recognizing that many of your members have significant, responsibilities in the field? So is a month, once a month?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Commissioner Adams. I appreciate it. I think frequency has more to do with steps within the planning process, both taking input before the working groups begin to work so that it can be adequately considered. And then it certainly at a level of when the plan is in draft form and you have potentially delineated areas of reintroduction. And then I would leave it up to the very capable guidance of what will ultimately be the group that's appointed, as well as this commission, to pick other times. And I think it also depends on areas of the state. Frequency also wasn't to the same audience multiple times as much as it was saying what areas of the state you haven't heard from, especially where wolves will potentially be introduced. I very much think about the San Juans and southern San Luis Valley and places like that when I think about things like this, because we have members in those areas and we really do need to go with where they live in order to get their input in those cases.
Thank you, Commissioner Fankhauser. One last question I see, Commissioner Touchton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Fankhauser, I hope you're still there. You turned into your logo, but you seem very knowledgeable on a lot of these topics. And so I'll try to make it quick. You mentioned the cost to producers that are sort of indirect, like gestation rates are falling, and obviously there'll be additional work. And I wondered if you had any information on how one goes about quantifying those losses so that they can be compensated. It seems like a really difficult thing to put a number on. And so I wonder if you have any information about how you go about doing that.
Thank you, Commissioner Touchton, for the question. It's a good question. And I would say the body of research that's out there in this area that's been studied is certainly not of the magnitude as things like depredation. But it does exist. The other element that I would say probably does exist also is we do have performance records and data within the industry, and those would need to be presented from those individual producers in a way that's verifiable and accurate. But I also think that there are some models that have been looked at in other states, potentially even other countries, that try to address and account for those impacts that are indirect. You're correct in determining that I think it's a more complex discussion, but I am confident that there is select few individuals out there that have studied this issue that can probably report on it much better than I can.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fankhauser, and appreciate your time today. Just as a quick reminder, we're at 9:54. We're not going to get to all our speakers. So Katie, when we approach 10 o'clock, we'll have to terminate public comment and move forward to the next agenda item to stay on schedule. So with that, I'll let you get to the next speaker.
Sure, sounds good. So we'll have Matt Barnes followed by Carrie Froese. Matt, would you like your camera on?
Yes, please.
You may have to hit accept.
There we
All
go.
right, go ahead.
Good morning. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. I'm confident that you are going to be able to implement the mandate of Proposition 114 as a leading wildlife agency in the West. And I would just like to say a few things about learning about livestock conflicts and coexistence. I've had the honor of working with ranchers in the Northern Rockies for several years in Western Montana and Northwestern Wyoming, in places that do indeed have wolves and grizzly bears, and developing some tools. So including some of the tools that Commissioner Haskett referenced earlier, which are the relatively less well-known ones, still kind of on the leading edge of the innovation adoption curve. So anyway, I just would like to encourage you to consider that the relatively well-known tools are not the only ones in the toolbox. They all work some of the time, none of them work all the time. And consider that there's more to this discussion than lethal and non-lethal tools. The ideal approaches are proactive, preventative, and to the degree that it's possible, focused on the manageable animals, namely the livestock, versus the relatively unmanageable animals, namely the wolves. So, and with that, the only other thing I'd like to say right now in this short time is that coexistence is a science and an art, and it's always evolving. I think the stakeholder group will have a lot to say over the years to come, not just in the next 2 to 3 years. And Colorado has an opportunity to reinvent coexistence and compensation in ways that incentivize coexistence rather than incentivize conflict. And that would mean doing things a little bit differently than it's been done in the Northern Rockies. So thank you, and I wish you the best.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. I don't see any questions for you, so thanks for presenting here today. And Katie, we can move to the next speaker.
Sure, we'll have Carrie Froese. If there's time remaining after that, we'll have Norman Bishop.
Okay.
Carrie, would you like your camera on?
Yes, please.
You may have to hit accept on your end. There we go. You're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair McDaniel and commissioners. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to provide comment this morning. My name is Carrie Froese, and I live near La Junta, Colorado. My husband and I and our small children, we have a farm as well as a ranch with cow-calf operation. And I am thankful to be here, and I would like to provide comment on that. I would urge you to provide to include agriculture-specific educational sessions throughout the state designed to explain and define language included in Proposition 114, and specifically those affecting the farmers and ranchers. Example of that would include in Proposition 114, it states that the commission shall not impose any land, water, or resource use restrictions on private landowners in furtherance of the plan. I personally, and I think other farmers and ranchers would appreciate knowing what is meant by impose and what can we provide as input on that going forward with the study and with the plan going forward, as well as the wording resolve conflicts is used for those of us in farming and ranching in the state. What all is included by resolving conflicts? What all does that mean? And defining that going forward through those educational sessions. Lastly, I'd also ask that these educational sessions, as been mentioned several times, that they do hold these sessions throughout the state for all of us to be able to participate as we the people. This bill was passed by the people, and please include the people throughout these educational sessions, including throughout all of Colorado. And please record them and make them available on the website for those that cannot participate in the in-person sessions. If you do have those, that they can go back and see them on your website. So thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments this morning. And I don't see I don't see any questions for you. Thanks again for participating in our meeting today. We'll have time, I think, to take one last speaker. Katie.
All right, then we'll have Norman Bishop. Looks like Norman, you're unmuted and on camera, so you can go ahead.
Thank you, Director Prinsloo, Chairman McDaniels, and Commissioners. I'm really enjoying this session because I think you're making great progress. But I do find the planning process outlined during the January meeting overly complex and more expensive than necessary. By holding public meetings without providing a draft plan, you are inviting those who with opposing viewpoints to line up at the microphone and repeat the campaign debate. A more productive approach would be to produce a staff draft, then seek public comment, perhaps by email. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service took 2.5 years to prepare the gray wolf EIS for Yellowstone and Central Idaho. They received 160,000 comments from 50 states and 40 countries. I can't imagine that Colorado could face unique challenges to restoring wolves that were not covered in that process. A Colorado stakeholder group already developed a plan in 2004 and 5 to manage wolves. I'm pleased and delighted that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has responded to Director Prinsloo's request, and I look forward to their support. If the technical group is to be most useful, I hope it will include scientists who have played major roles in previous wolf restoration, not just management projects, and who have published relevant original data and analyses in peer-reviewed journals following the wolf's return to the Northern Rockies, as well as experience in coexistence with wolves. Finally, I hope that CPW will be in a position to release wolves by November 22nd in compliance with the governor's direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop, and we are out of time on this agenda item today. But I don't have any questions for you anyway, but we need to move forward. So let's get to agenda item 4. Reed, I'll return the floor to you for discussion of public listening sessions, and hopefully you can give us a quick breakdown of that so we can get to public comment and discussion, or feedback. So I'll start with you, Reed.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, and impressive time management. So good job. So this topic, I just kind of want to frame it before we get too far down the road. When we presented the plan, we presented this idea of the education component and the public listening sessions kind of occurring at the same time. And our anticipation and hopeful thinking was that COVID restrictions would ease at that time and we'd be able to get back to in-person meetings, especially for the listening session. Obviously, that has not happened yet. It's on the horizon, but we don't know exactly when we'll be able to be face-to-face, which I'm sure we all look forward to. So just as we talked about with the education series, we really do think there's an opportunity there to do that virtually, especially with bringing in speakers from out of state or other places other than Colorado would be really helpful to do that virtually. So thank you for that discussion. I would like to talk about the public listening session ideas, and I really do think we need to break the two apart and do something different, which I'll propose here. But just a reminder in Proposition 114, and I'm going to read directly from the proposition language. It says, notwithstanding any provision of state law to the contrary, including Section 33.2.105-5 subsection 2, and in order to restore gray wolves to the state, the Commission shall develop a plan to restore and manage gray wolves in Colorado using the best scientific data available. And then subsection B says it shall hold statewide hearings to acquire information to be considered in developing such plan, including scientific, economic, and social considerations pertaining to such restoration. So that's the language from Proposition 114, and that is why we're talking about these public listening sessions. It directs us in that language to do such. And even if it didn't, I'm sure we would want to do that. So the question and the discussion before us right now is when do we want to do that? And do we want to do that in a virtual environment or in a in-person environment? You've started to hear testimony to both those right now, and I'm sure you will hear in a minute. So I just want to give a little bit of clarity to what we view as the process from CPW's standpoint, and maybe that would help the discussion as going forward, just to make sure again that we're on the right page here. So we certainly believe that it would be very helpful before we start these listening sessions to come out with some sort of a very basic outline of a plan, and maybe even refer to it as a table of contents, such as like, what are we going to talk about in this plan? What do we anticipate those discussions looking like? And that would be the basis for these public listening sessions, that this wouldn't be a full-blown plan. There'd be no real subject matter in that plan, but more just the basic topics of the plan. And that would be what we would take out to listen to the public about. Our recommendation before we invest everyone's time and effort is that we do kind of hit the streets with a basic outline, and that the listening sessions again would be to make sure we're hitting the mark and providing the basic structure of that plan. And then as we go and listen, we would continue to learn, as we have from some of the commenters already today. We also recommend that we start this process as soon as we can, but do that in a COVID kind of free environment, or allow the COVID restrictions to cease so that we can meet these in person. We also recommend that this would be something that would occur this summer, hopefully, if we can be in person again, and that by that time we would have seated the technical working group and the stakeholders advisory group so that they could benefit as well from the listening and the public comments. Also, as far as locations, these would be diverse in locations across the state, with an emphasis on the Western Slope, but obviously East Slope communities and Front Range communities would want to comment as well. So I hope that gives a basic structure of what we're talking about. So again, our recommendation would be in person, bring forward a very draft structure of a plan, and then present that and listen to the public before we go into the full-blown development or work of the technical working group or the stakeholders advisory group. So I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Reed. Before I take commissioner questions, I see that Executive Director Dan Gibbs has his hand up. So I think he wants to give us some additional comment before we take commissioner questions. Is that right, Dan?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thanks so much, Reed, for that information. Looking at the ballot question, yeah, obviously, hold statewide hearings to assist in developing this plan. My just thoughts are that we start as quickly as possible with this process. My preference would be that I think we all agree it'd be great to do these in person, of course. I've heard from, CCI and Club 20, a lot of different Western Slope organizations that definitely would agree, if at all possible, to do this in person. But obviously we need to look at what state health guidelines look like, what local public health ordinances are as well, because there's a dial, of course, depending on where you're at in the state. Moffat County could be different than Mesa County, for example. So I think we need to be a little bit nimble, just to recognize that, every county is not the same exactly where they're at with COVID. I do think that we should have as much, Reed, you mentioned like an outline of a plan. I mean, I feel like we're not starting from scratch necessarily. I mean, we have our 2004 plan that was, extremely well done. And this at least gives us a starting point, and really even much more so than a starting point. So I would urge us to have more than just an outline of a plan, because we really want folks to have some meaningful information for people to chew on, frankly. We've been hearing from folks, you've received the same emails that I have. Folks have varying concerns, and some folks, want to see wolves on the landscape tomorrow, and some folks don't. And we're receiving a lot of information, but we have to be clear on what, the voters' intent have, before us, that we have, wolves in the landscape by December 31st, 2023. So, so again, my preference would be in person, but if we can't, then I think we should still move forward with doing meetings virtually, and even have like a targeted meeting. For example, like we could reach out to Moffat County commissioners to have a targeted meeting for that county. We could reach to Garfield County to have a targeted meeting for folks that live in Garfield County. And so I think there's ways that we can be flexible and nimble and gather input, but have as much information as possible for people to chew on the front end while we're gathering what their thoughts and concerns are along the way. So just my 2 cents on that.
Thank you, Executive Director Gibbs. Let's go to Commissioner questions and/or comments. Commissioner Touchton.
Thank you, Chair. So first, I think on the location of the meetings, I agree with Director Gibbs. In person is best if we can do it, but we shouldn't let the virus keep us from getting stuff done. So I think we should proceed with a strong preference for in person. On that front, in our materials that were sent to us to prepare for this hearing, there were some proposed pieces of legislation included in the package. I don't know if those will pass or not, but I view them as suggestions. And there's one, it's Senate Bill 105, I think it's Cornum, Rankum, and Sonnenberg, that had a suggestion, well, they want to make it law, but I view it as a good idea that we might adopt for these hearings, which was to have one in every congressional district, and then 3 in congressional district 3, which is the West Slope. And I thought that was a good idea. If that piece of legislation passes, we might as well get ahead of the curve and comply with it. I think we should have a hearing in every congressional district and more on the West Slope. And 3 seemed like they picked that number. Do we go out to the public with a sort of a draft plan? I feel very strongly about that. I think we need to give the public something new and get some response. I think that would be much more valuable to have them look at a draft and read I think more than a table of contents would be good. What I'd really like to see is alternatives. There's different ways we could do this. And just to give an example, what is a sustainable wolf population? One of the goals of the ballot initiative. You could say, here's 3 options that are supportable. Give us some feedback on which of these options is the most supportable. All right, I know we're short for time, but those are my points on these 2 topics.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Touchton. And let's move forward to Commissioner Hauser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a little bit of a blend of comments based on the conversation this morning. To me, it's a bit of an and both on this, maybe channeling my day job. We've been through a year of delivering education in lots of different ways. And so I do think that there are opportunities as long as we communicate appropriately in this. Certainly in person is important, but let's make the in-person occasions efficient and effective. And it may be, again, sort of using educational jargon that we flip the classroom. And that is to say, as many of these education sessions that we can deliver asynchronously potentially, and listening to some of the public comment, these don't have to be sessions where you tune in at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday. We can do these similar to the way that we do herd management plans. And that is that they are available to us and to the public at the time that we have at our disposal. And then they're utilized and tapped for those in-person discussions so that we can use those really effectively. To Commissioner Adams' comments, I agree with sort of disaggregating some of this and tailoring to the various different stakeholder groups. I actually think we have a remarkable opportunity in this, as divided as both the vote was and sort of the public comment that's coming into us from sort of kind of urban stakeholders and those sort of on the Western Slope, maybe to Commissioner Touchton's comment in Congressional District 3. We have an opportunity to bridge that divide through this educational process and to have those sort of in kind of an urban corridor understand what a rancher in, the Payance Basin will, how this will impact him or her or that family. And conversely, an opportunity for our Western Slope neighbors to understand or to either, to be part of this process. The oversampling of Congressional District 3, I think would be an incredible gesture, an opportunity for those that are most impacted to be at the table in a way that really listens to them. So, the tension I think that I hear in all these conversations and in public comment is that we want to do this well. And we want it to be transparent. We want it to be very inclusive. That also takes time. So I think our goal, as outlined in Proposition 114, to have this completed by no later than December of 2023, means we've got to find a blend of effectiveness, efficiency, and speed, and to do it really well, and to make sure that we've included all stakeholders in Colorado. And to Director Gibbs' comments in our last meeting, to really do this as a state. So again, just to underscore that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Hauser. Commissioner Adams.
Yes, echo many of the comments of fellow commissioners, and actually raise my hand for the wondering around a yes and as well, which is just wanting to make a plug to continue having online options, regardless of what our in-person capacity or capabilities are related to the pandemic. I have seen increased participation because of the virtual setting options and availability, and it is making it more accessible for those who are not able to travel and meet in person. Even if the in-person session is in their district, it may be difficult with those who have multiple jobs, etc. So having that in-person or that virtual option that is recorded, I think will be tremendously helpful as we look ahead. So I just wanted to comment on that. And then there was something else, but I lost my train of thought. So I will go ahead and turn it over for the sake of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, Chair. Reed, I would just ask about the involvement of the working groups and the commissioners in these public listening sessions. I would hope that there's going to be some interplay. I would hope as a commissioner that I'm on board and listening to these sessions, and I would think the working groups would as well. And so it makes sense that we have at least the beginning of these educational webinars as commissioners before we start. And the working groups have met and at least have some idea of where they're headed, which in short, this leads to, I agree with your idea that I think we need to have at least a draft plan, however rough, before we initiate these listening sessions. And that would, by default, make sure that we have our educational webinars begun and the working groups on board.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Blecka.
Hi, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to make a comment with regards to the talking about where we should be having these meetings, these listening meetings within the state, and the idea of holding one in every congressional district. I totally get that. However, I would really, and maybe false. I assumed actually that we would be going to every county on the western slope. I think that it's important that instead of just having this broad, space, because I don't even know what congressional, that third congressional district is huge. But what you're talking about is, you're not going to get Jackson County to be adequately represented if the meeting's going to be held in Steamboat, because that's what always happens. And so I think you need to take it to the people whose lives are going to be impacted by this. And I don't think just having a couple hotspots within these congressional districts, especially on the West Slope, is fair. I think it's unfair. I think we need to go into the places that the wolf is either already there or has a likelihood of being introduced into. I think that would be fair to the people that live there. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Blecka. Commissioner Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First and foremost, I'll just say I echo much of what Commissioner Hauser said, but to get to some basics, I think there is some level of familiarity amongst the public with the NEPA process that federal land management agencies employ for planning efforts. And I think that there is a somewhat corollary to what we're discussing here. which is providing that basic outline is similar to an analysis of management situation, if you will, but being able to base the involvement of those listening sessions with a nod towards a scoping process. What aren't we seeing here? What aren't we including as part of the questions we're asking? We're not necessarily seeking out positions regarding specifics of management. More along the lines are we hitting the mark on what we are including for this draft plan? That makes a ton of sense to me. So I really support being able to base this off of some type of outline interaction. What as well as the idea of being able to do both virtual and in person. I think being able to collect from the widest berth possible is important. But what I really would like to see is also, what does this look like in terms of a time commitment and financial commitment? Like just getting an idea of, if we're talking about 15 in-person meetings, what does that schedule look like for both staff, the commission, and the public to be able to engage in over X amount of time? It'd be great to have an understanding of what it is we're exactly talking about, because right now it's rather nebulous and broad. Let's do some of these and do some of these. Yeah, that all sounds great to me. I think more outreach the better, and definitely making sure that we're on the ground in West Slope communities and hearing directly from folks' mouths. But it's a difficult picture to necessarily understand with the broad strokes that we're talking about right now. So just want to provide those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Schaefer. We'll take all first comments. So I'll move to Commissioner Haskett, and then I'll give Commissioner Adams her second bite at the apple.
Thank you, Chairman McDaniel. There's been a lot of good comments by all the commissioners, and I appreciate that. I just kind of want to circle back to, we need to be widespread, and we need to cover the West Slope. I think it's extremely important. If the congressional district is huge, if I have to drive to a big city, it's at least 2 hours, if not more than that. We need to remember that. And these counties are huge. There's 20 counties. Why can't we have meetings simultaneously in Durango and Steamboat, vice versa, so we're covering more ground at one time? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Haskett. Commissioner Adams.
Thank you, Chairman. I remember the other question, and it was sitting next to it, and it said questions, and I was like, oh. And so going back to Director Gibbs' comment around the pace at which we can start the process, one of the challenges I have about waiting for our first draft is we don't know when the first draft will be available. So I'm wondering if there could be some pre-draft questions similar to this session, right? But that it would be more for the public, where they're the kind of those sticking questions where public feedback would help inform the draft development. So, it's not this broad, how do you feel about the plan or what the timeline is, but coming in to address specific questions. So that's one variant that could allow the engagement process to happen, and to allow staff to have some additional input around any 2 or 3 sticking point areas that may be beneficial to have some additional public comment around those particular areas if the draft is not going to be available in a couple of months. I also echo the comments around the financial commitment, not only of the agency, but of the people that are coming out to these multiple sessions. So again, just being mindful of the engagement points around this topic, coupled with the other topics that CPW needs stakeholder engagement on, like Fisher's Peak and many other issues. And then just wanting to, again, echo the economies of scale. How can we build off of other convenings and opportunities to gather on multiple topics? If somebody's driving 2 hours each way, I would love for them to be able to weigh in on a couple of topics. If there are other topics that are important and the staff needs their feedback on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. I'm going to need to call an end to this comment section and move forward to public comment, but not without my own chance of giving a couple of comments. It's a pretty important topic to me. Number one, I just want to second a lot of the comments I heard today. I don't think we can overdo an input opportunity with regards to how, I'll call it, difficult and divisive this topic is across our state. And gathering that input, I think, is really critical. And I heard that a lot through all the commissioners. With regards to whether a plan is put out, I just personally feel that there's probably some fine line between Reed about, a draft plan versus a table of contents. My own personal opinion about that is real difficult for me to believe that you want my input if you put out a plan before you get it. So, if you really want my input, but I also really like the idea of the questions, Commissioner Adams, or some kind of table of content to generate more input and to put at least some skeleton out there about what this would look like so we can move this process forward more efficiently. But moving all the way forward to like alternatives and so forth, well, then it's kind of pre-cooked, at least in my mind, when you get it to me, versus really wanting my input, both before a plan is approved by this commission and after a draft plan is put together and before this commission actually votes on it. Those are just really critical, viewpoints or steps. Commissioner Touchdown, unless you can give me your comment in 30 seconds, can you do that so we can move forward to public comment? You can. Okay.
Yes, I'll give it my best. Following on what you just said, Mr. Chair, maybe a middle ground is we summarize the 2004 plan that Director Gibbs mentioned, put our table of contents or whatever Reed can get together and send that out to the public and say, okay, what's wrong with this 2004 plan? But at least start to get some feedback. We've given the public something new to chew on. And I don't think that many people have read the 2004 plan. And that might be a thing that we could start to say, what would you change in 2020 from what we did in 2004? All right.
Hey, you did meet 30 seconds. That could be a record for you, Jay. Reed, I think we've given you lots to chew on with regards to that. And let's get to our public comment, Katie. We are sitting, for everyone's benefit, we are sitting at 10:25. We're supposed to break at 10:40, which would, we'll see how this goes with our public comment. Maybe we can cut our break a little bit short, but anyway, let's get rolling and see how many we can get to so we can stay on schedule. Thank you, Katie.
Sure. So we're going to start with our elected official that signed up for public comment. Elected officials will have up to 5 minutes, and I'll give a warning at 4-minute mark. So we have Commissioner Timothy Lovato, who's joining us by phone. Do we have Commissioner Lovato unmuted? Commissioner Lovato, are you there?
Yes, I am. I was unmuting. Thank you. I'd like to thank you for. Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank you for giving me the time to voice my concerns and comments. I go by Kim Lovato. I'm the county commissioner for District 3, representing the western portion of Saguache County. In my district, there's approximately 75% of federal lands. And listening to the questions and comments that were given earlier before I came on to state something, I will be stating some concerns and also possible remarks and consideration that could be incorporated in your plan. Anyhow, the western part of Saguache County is mainly comprised of cow-calf producers, and majority of those producers run on federal lands or are permittees on federal lands. Saguache County on January 8th, 2020, passed the resolution opposing any efforts to introduce or expand the population of wolves into the state of Colorado. In that, we feel it would affect recreational activities, livestock production, which are two of the primary components of the Colorado economy, especially here in Saguache County. The majestic wildlife that we have here in Saguache County: elk, bighorn sheep, and antelope, not to mention or forget deer, will be vastly impacted by the introduction of the wolves. I hear in the conversations beforehand about the northern part of the state, the county is affected in the state, but how is the commission or the Parks and Wildlife going to keep wolves from going south of I-70, going east over the Continental Divide? And that to me is a big concern. In the resolution that Saguache County Commissioners passed, we had some comments that we wanted to make, and we did make. The board opposes any efforts to introduce or expand the population of wolves into Colorado. The board supports the position taken by Colorado Parks and Wildlife in its resolution 16-01. And the board requests that any federal or state wolf management plans include funding to offset the negative impact of wolves on livestock, wildlife management, hunting, and other adversely affected sectors of the local economies. The board supports efforts to include a requirement that any publicly funded or sponsored wolf education program include comprehensive and balanced discussions about the impact of wolves on local economies and include prospective livestock producers, hunters, and public health officials. And I feel it's important that all of the counties that have lands on the west side of the Continental Divide be part of this plan process. I see where the Front Range has one size fits all, and that size doesn't fit everywhere here, especially in rural Colorado. Saguache County did not pass the Proposition 114. It was defeated, and by roughly 6%. The state did pass it statewide by 0.09% of a percent. So, it's a very slim margin. So those are my concerns, and I think Saguache County does need to be part of the process on the plan and be able to voice our concerns as well as our constituents. That is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lovato. I don't have any questions for you. So with that, we can move forward to the next speaker. Katie?
Thank you. So we'll get into public comment. We didn't have everyone who signed up on, but let's go with the ones that we do. So we'll have Callie Hendrickson, followed by Deborah Taylor. So Callie, would you like your camera on?
Yes, that would be fine. Thank you.
Okay, you may need to hit accept on your end. There you are. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you all. So Chairman McDaniel and fellow commissioners, my name is Callie Hendrickson. I'm the Executive Director of the White River and Douglas Creek Conservation Districts here in Rio Blanco County in the northwest corner of the state, as well as a board member of Colorado Farm Bureau. Our community would support Mr. DeWalt and the CPW's proposal. That proposal will help in reducing the divide between the east and the west slope and those that support and those that oppose introduction of wolves. That is something that is definitely needed to make this a successful effort. In regards to in-person versus virtual meetings, as many of you commissioners have noted, it is critical to have these meetings in person and in the locations that will be most impacted by the introduction of wolves. Absolutely, these meetings need to be in person in each county. And I appreciated one of the commissioners noted that. I think that is critical. That has the potential for, each one of those counties that has the potential for released wolves. One meeting on the western slope is not acceptable. Commissioners need to come to the locations and tour and see the reality that will be for those who live here. In regards to whether there's a plan written or just an outline before you come to these hearings, I would just like to note, I have a friend, Jeff Myers, who in regards to water issues we work on, he noted, once a plan or process is drafted, input may be able to move the needle to the east or the west just a little bit, but nearly impossible to move to the north or south. So please allow it to have just the outline. I think that's a good idea. And then bring it to the communities.
Thank you very much, Callie. Appreciate your comments today. I don't have any questions for you, and thank you for your participation. Next, Katie.
We'll have Deborah Taylor, followed by Suzanne O'Neill. Deborah, would you like your camera on?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Good morning, Deborah, and welcome.
Good morning. Let's see if I can navigate all of this. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Deborah Taylor. I currently live in Denver, Colorado, but I also have a residence in Teller County, pretty far west of Pikes Peak. I hope you will take the opportunity with the public listening sessions to be scientific informational sessions, to present to the community scientifically sound restoration plans and management alternatives so they become the focus for discussion and comments with the statewide public hearings. Facilitated comment sessions can be calm if the presenter presents and stays with scientific data and corrects the falsehoods. Hopefully, the sessions can be in person and also offered through streaming to the communities. I have looked at Montana and Idaho state cattle mortality data, and yet those residents continue to share falsehoods, different from what is on government websites. You can avoid these problems of false information by staying with government data and scientific facts. For both those of opposition and in support of wolves, and the sessions need to be presented unbiased facts calmly. There are benefits, scientific benefits for returning wolves. Sadly, fear has been allowed to be ramped up in the state by spreading of false information. Elk and deer will more likely die in great numbers from weather than from wolves. The outlook of wolves taking down sick elk and deer should be positive, as chronic wasting disease has been rising.
Time's up.
Sorry about that, but thank you very much, Deborah, for participating today. I don't have any questions for you, so let's look forward to the next speaker. And I think that'll probably be our last one, Katie, because I think we're going to run out of time.
Well, that's good, because actually the others weren't around or yielded their time, so we're in good shape. So last we have Suzanne O'Neill. Suzanne, would you like your camera on? Suzanne, are you there?
Yes, please.
Okay,
yeah.
Just a moment.
Yep, I'm here. Do you have me?
Looks like you're coming up. Yep, go ahead.
We got it. Good morning and welcome. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Director. Suzanne O'Neill, Colorado Wildlife Federation. We appreciate today's meeting and believe at milestones during the planning process, additional meetings will be very beneficial. When I was on YouTube, more than 240 people were tuned in. So a lot of the public is engaged this morning. A couple recommendations that will be important to the public and the stakeholders advisory group. First, we think at critical milestones, it would be good to have a joint meeting between the SAG and the technical team, or a subgroup of the technical team. And this is because this will allow the SAG participants in real time directly to ask clarifying questions, substantive questions, and also provide their perspectives at the particular stage to the tech team and get direct responses. We think this will also be helpful to the public because they likely have some similar questions. Second one is we recommend that the Commission and CPW add a phase 3 now into the plan, even though it's not ready to be built out. And this would signal to the public that in implementation, adaptive management is going to require additional investment in communication channels, problem solving, collaboration, and discussion of shared lessons, because we all want to minimize impacts to working lands and beyond. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Zen. Appreciate you participating today. I don't have any questions for you. So again, thanks for coming to the meeting. Katie?
Chair McDaniel, that's our public comment on this item. I just wanted to say for any members of the public that are still on the Zoom meeting, but you are not commenting on our next item number 5, if you could please leave the Zoom meeting and just listen on YouTube, we'd appreciate that. And we will start admitting members of the public who are providing comment for item 5.
Okay, well, shockingly, we're on schedule for the break. So let's go to break for 10 minutes and reconvene at 10:50. Thank you. Dion, can you take us into break, please?
I will.
ready, Chair McDaniel?
I am, Dion. Thank you. Well, we'll start a bit too soon. It's now 10:50. We'll bring the meeting back into order here, and we'll move forward with agenda item number 5. Reed, are you prepared to begin that item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm
There you
certainly
are.
ready to go. You hear me all right?
We do.
Okay, so under this particular agenda item, there's several subgroups, and so we're gonna talk about several things in this topic. Would you prefer, Mr. Chair, to go topic by topic and then get commissioner comment, or do all the topics and then get commissioner topic or input?
It might be more efficient to go topic by topic. If we can just kind of, I'll have to help you in moving along so we can make sure we get to a public comment period, Reed.
Okay.
But I'm with you. If you do them all at the end, and then we're going to get questions from all over the place. So let's try to do it topic by topic, see how it goes. And like I said, I'll help you move along.
Okay, and that would be our preference, so we can keep it all straight. So the first part under this topic is when we presented the plan at the last meeting, we presented the technical working group and the stakeholder advisory group, and in that we had listed that we have a Parks and Wildlife Commissioner as an ex officio non-voting member as part of those groups. We never really finalized the makeup of those groups, and that will be part of the discussion to come, as well as the makeup of those groups. But I think right now we need to finalize whether a commissioner will sit on both of those groups or not. And I know you all have been thinking about that since the last meeting, as have we. We've heard a lot of comments, and believe me, by a lot, I mean a lot of comments on this whole topic, and have thought about it a lot. Our preference right now would be for all commissioners to be present at these conversations, so that one commissioner doesn't have a particular advantage or more information than any of them, and make these meetings open to all the commissioners at the time. So that's a substantive change to what we presented before. But before we just go ahead with what we think is good, we think it is important to obviously hear from all of you. So that's kind of the genesis for this topic and what's behind it. But I think now it would be good to turn it over to you, Mr. Chair, for the next step.
Thank you, Reed. Before I start taking, or we start taking questions or comments, I want to make sure you clarify what you just said. There would be no commissioner, I'll call it ex officio member of either committee, but all commissioners would be invited to all of their meetings, and there's some expectation for attendance, or seems, I'm not quite sure exactly what you're recommending for the commissioners to do.
Yeah, and thank you, and apologize for the lack of clarity. Not that it would be required by all commissioners, but definitely open to the commissioners to attend and listen in, not be active participants in those meetings, but to be in the audience if they wanted to be, and so that all commissioners would have the same ability to have the same amount of information going forward. And then we would have either the groups themselves or the facilitator or staff, or a combination of all three, be the liaisons to the commission instead of having a commissioner fill that role, if that makes sense. Did I clarify that enough?
I think so. Let's move forward to commissioner questions, and then I'll circle back with you. Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, Chair. Reed, my recommendation would be that we have an ex officio commissioner on each of the working groups. A couple of reasons. One, for consistency. I realize that you want all of us to try to attend. It likely won't happen that everybody will be able to attend, but I think we should have at least one commissioner on each one that does attend each and every meeting. I think the role of that commissioner would need to be outlined. I think ex officio is the right idea for several reasons I won't go into. But that the role would be to work with the division and directly with the facilitator as they prepare for each meeting, and as they maybe sort of digest each meeting afterwards for presentation to the full commission at a later date. So I think it's a very active role, and I think it's one where the commissioner on each of these, as an ex officio member, would have to dedicate a substantial amount of time outside of just the meetings themselves, which you wouldn't require if you had all of the commissioners. I really think it's going to require a commitment to reading all of the comments, to listening to all of the input, and to being actively involved in each of the working groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Touchton.
Thank you. Reed, I appreciate your suggestion. I appreciate Commissioner Garcia's as well. And what I'm wondering is if we can combine the two. I don't see those as mutually exclusive propositions. I think I support Commissioner Garcia on having an ex officio member on the groups. That seems to be our standard practice. I haven't been around long enough to know for sure, but that's what we did with the State Wildlife Area Pass group, and it seemed to work just fine. Because of the ballot initiative here and the public's assigning to us of the responsibilities, personally, I'd like to go to all these things. I think we need to own it as commissioners and do the work. And so I'd like to have that option if my schedule allows to show up at these things. So again, it just I'd endorse a merger of those concepts, and let's do them both.
Thank you, Commissioner Touchton. Commissioner Hauser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am just listening carefully, and I will admit to wrestling with this. I actually am not sure I like either of these. And for the following reasons. Certainly, I think we should be involved, but I don't think we should have an undue influence in these groups. And just by our presence, particularly if there are 11 of us in these meetings, I think that would result in undue influence. Certainly, we need to listen. And in other topics, we listen to the very good work of technical advisory groups and staff work. And then we are able to vet and answer questions, ask questions of that. Certainly these are public meetings, so, we can attend or listen in. The optics, I think, are the most important. If there is either an ex officio or a liaison commissioner to this process, however that's titled, I concur with the notion that we need to have that be a very clear understanding of what that is and where and how we engage. The purity of those two committees, in my view, is really important. So when the information comes back to us, we know that it has that purity. And just by virtue, again, of having a commissioner sitting at the table, it could have some undue influence. So that's my sort of quick reaction to it. Certainly open to the discussion today, but that concerns me a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Haskett.
I'll be real quick. I agree with what Commissioner Hauser said. I think the optics are extremely important in how people feel. They need to be able to work independently without us. And on top of that, everything is coming back to us as a commission as a whole. So I'm not sure we need representation there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Haskett. Commissioner Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep it quick. I agree with Commissioners Hauser and Haskett.
That has to be the record for the shortest comment, Commissioner Schaefer. Appreciate it.
Not fair, Commissioner Schaefer.
Commissioner Adams.
I ditto Hauser.
Keep it shorter. You now have the record. Thank you, Commissioner Adams. Commissioner Phillips.
Also short as well, but I think our staff will do a good job of representing us there and reporting back. So I would concur with the four before.
Thank you, Commissioner Phillips. Commissioner Blecka.
I feel the same as the previous 5 commissioners have mentioned. Thank you,
Commissioner Blecka. Well, I had some comments I wanted to make, but Commissioner Hauser already said them. It's been supported by quite a few commissioners. I feel, frankly, very strongly that no commissioner should participate in either group. It's a perception of independence. And I think it would weigh strongly on the brand and reputation of this commission. And I'm sure that we can do a very good job of sorting through the information and being able to move this plan forward and vote without having to actually participate. And I think the public will really look at us. So anyway, thank you very much. I do have a second round of comments, or at least one. Commissioner Touchton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield to the majority will. I just want a little piece of clarification, which is, are you suggesting that commissioners shouldn't even attend the stakeholder or tag groups as an audience member? Are you saying we should just completely disappear
That's
from
what
that
I
process?
heard, Commissioner Touchton, as well as I support. I do think they, perhaps Reed, you could talk about, they can be recorded, so you could listen to them, offline, and get that information for your own personal, growth and education with regards to this. But even presence, I think, is a very difficult obstacle to overcome. Commissioner Hauser.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I concur with that. Maybe this is a question for Reed. Reed, is it your, by estimation, that this group will travel? I just wonder if there might be a way to find a little compromise in this. If there's a role for a commissioner, for example, if a meeting is happening in Meeker, and for Commissioner Haskett to welcome the group, indicate how important their work is, appreciate them, whatever, that would seem appropriate to me. I don't know that having a commissioner in the room or on the Zoom or present, I do think both gives a commissioner or commissioners, quote, advantage, or, it sways you. Obviously, you don't have the same kind of objectivity. So if there's some way to involve the commission in more of sort of that honorary kickoff type of responsibility, but then for us to step back and really wait for the work of those groups would seem to be how I would probably lean. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hauser. Commissioner Schaefer.
I'll yield and let Mr. DeWalt answer that question because I have the same question.
Okay. You want to go ahead and take that, Reed, before we finish commissioner comments?
Yeah, I think it's yet to be determined, but if I would have a say that these groups need to travel around consistently and to just be in those communities where we need to continue to hear and to have these available for the public. I think we're at a little bit of a crossroads because we've all adapted to an online environment here in the last year. And there's sort of an expectation of meetings being available all the time, but then there's an in-person. And I don't think we've figured that out yet, like how to have an in-person meeting, but have it available to be recorded. I don't think it's a challenge we can't overcome. I think that's an important piece to figure out. So I do see them to see them moving around. I think the only group that would have maybe some difficulty is the technical working group because of the nature of some of these people that help us with that. Scientists and things may not be able to travel as readily, especially if we have people from other states or jurisdictions on that working group. The stakeholder group would mostly be Colorado, or should be all Colorado citizens. Not mostly, it will be all Colorado citizens. I don't know if I answered that or just voided it.
Well, I think your boss wants to add some additional flavor to that answer. So why don't you go ahead, Director Prinsloo?
I'll try and be very succinct. If that's the sense I get of the commission, we will record those. If there's an honorary thing, that's fine. We can work on that, but we will record those for all commission to, and I heard that earlier, to listen to at their own perusal and not have to be present. So I hear that black and white. We'll make sure that happens. The recording of those groups, all commission can listen to it at their own.
Thank you, Director Prinsloo. Did you have a follow-up comment, Commissioner Schaefer, or did that answer it for you?
No, that largely answered it. I want to make a clear distinction. I don't see a ton of harm in commissioners observing, but I do believe that there is a very distinct line between participation and observation here, and being able to see the recordings on that would alleviate any potential issues I might have. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Schaefer. Commissioner Garcia.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I still believe that we should have an ex officio member. It was pointed out we did have on the state wildlife area working group. Every working group I've ever seen, and any commissioner board had a member on the working group. I think it sends a message to the public that we are involved. I think otherwise, we can tell the public that, hey, we're all listening. We all, pick up the video and listen to it on our weekends, but I don't think it's the same as actually having a commissioner there, and that commissioner does not have to in any way dictate where that group is going. Their involvement would simply be to be there to answer questions, to be an active participant in terms of just being there as a member of the working group, but not to have any control over the working group in any fashion. And of course, as ex officio, it wouldn't be taking place in the voting as well.
Well, maybe we could transition with that with regards to, if it's all right with the group here, you give us that definition. I think when we look at the public comment read, we had some confusion on folks about both the technical working group and the SAG group voting on things, and who actually controls whatever you want to call formulation of plan. So could you give us some additional description with regards to that? And that might be helpful.
Yeah, certainly. So what I presented in the last meeting and in our plan was that both these groups are advisory in nature. They're not decision-making bodies, and we recommend consensus recommendations before the commission. So we would see these groups come before the commission with their recommendations. And maybe it would be helpful to explain again what these two groups do, or what we're anticipating them doing. Would that be helpful, Mr. Chair?
Sure, Reed.
Okay. So with the technical working group, we really see these as this as a group of CPW scientists, other state and federal agency experts who convene to provide objective scientific-based information to inform the development of the plan. And I'm actually reading from some of the memo that Director Prenslow sent out. So the technical working group will kind of shepherd the content of the plan. This is where the science of the plan will be discussed. Should be no other discussions at this group. This is a science-based discussions. Are the recommendations of the technical working group scientifically sound? Are they on correct footing from a legal and policy perspective, from an agency standpoint, or from the other scientists that we've asked to be part of this group? I've seen constantly in the public comment that we need to rely on scientists to help guide this plan, and that's where this is going to happen. We are a science-based organization, and we definitely will be reaching out to the best of the best in the wolf restoration world. And so one thing with this technical working group is that they can also have subgroups and bring in other experts. So if folks don't get on a technical working group spot, we can reach out to other groups. And then the role of the stakeholder advisory group is more a broader range of interests. And this is kind of where the politics and the social part of this wolf restoration part takes place. This is where we need to make sure that what the technical working group puts together actually makes sense on the ground. It might make sense scientifically, and then we take it out to somebody on the ground and they say, that's just not going to work. It maybe looks good in a science setting, but it doesn't work for a rancher or for wolf advocates or whatever. And so that's where the social aspects of the wolf plan are going to be discussed. I think one thing that's really helped me is that the main function of these groups is a thorough understanding of the impact of their choices on the other group. And this is kind of a vetting process between these two groups. These groups working closely together, but again, they're not decision-making bodies. That's you guys, that's the commission. The proposition is very clear that the commission is the decision-making body on this. So as far as like who actually writes the plan, CPW will have a huge role in that. My staff is going to put the words down on paper, and CPW staff. It's not going to just be left up and say, hey, what's everybody think a good plan would be? The scientists within CPW will take the advice of both these groups and do that drafting of that plan. So I don't know if that's helpful or just creates more confusion, but that's an answer to your question.
Well, it looks like it generated a few comments or at least questions. So let's see if we can move through those so we can get to our public comment with regard to this item, or if there's anything else you wanted to ask us or inform us about. Commissioner Haskett.
Thank you, Chairman McDaniel. We received a lot of letters, but in one of those letters, it mentioned about having an ex officio member of maybe somebody from the Wolf Working Group or an ex-commissioner. And I think that's actually maybe a solution. Don't know what the rest of you think, but the Wolf Working Group certainly spent many hours on this before, and they could have a little bit of insight, which might help, and they wouldn't have the optics of being from the commission.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Haskett. Commissioner May.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My comments are in agreement with Commissioner Garcia. I guess I'm struggling to understand how the commissioner being in attendance and simply observing in order to return back information would give that commissioner any undue influence. I don't think there will be any information available that is not readily available to the entire commission. And I think optics wise, it's a good look to have one ex officio member that's actively involved, that is part of the process. Of course, that will go along with the lines of no involvement and no influence, but I like the idea of having one of our commission in attendance at every function that is officially engaged by this commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner May. Commissioner Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question mainly for everyone, which is what role should the facilitator play in sort of this sort of discussion? Are we necessarily being a little bit too prescriptive at this juncture? And there should be some level of input in regards to both of these advisory groups, as well as potential commission interaction. Is that something that we want to have the thoughts of whomever ends up being the selected facilitator? It's just a genuine question I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Schaefer. We have one more question. I did want to respond to Commissioner May. I think one thing that was really important to me is that if you have a commissioner on each one of the committees, that does not place all 11 commissioners in the same place if we go to vote. And there's no way that one commissioner is going to inform the other 10 about what they saw and heard in the variety of meetings. I think of it as a jury. Would you take 2 members of a jury, assign one to the prosecutor and one to the defense, and they bring back the information before you vote on innocence or guilt? You don't do that. The 2 sides come together, all the information is presented, all the jury is in the same place, the same position with regards to their knowledge and the evidence that's presented, and come together to get to consensus on a position. And that's what's really important to me. I did think about this a little bit, and the only thing I could think of just off the top of my head is if there was a real strong feeling about putting a commissioner on, would that commissioner, and I think this would be critical, would not be allowed to vote on any wolf matter. That would separate the commission from participation. And I think that would be critically important to do to maintain our independence and the integrity of this commission, versus if there was a really strong feeling about having somebody on the committee. So with that, maybe I've spurred more conversation, but we'll go to Commissioner Touchton. We'll do these 3, and then we're going to really have to get to some comment, although I think we're going to end up having to shortcut that. So Commissioner Touchton, if we could stay brief, please.
Mr. Chair, I might just say duly noted. I appreciate your insight. Thank you. Duly noted.
Commissioner Touchton.
Thank you. Two points. One on Commissioner Haskett's suggestion about an honorary chair. The only concern I have there is conflict between an honorary chair and the facilitator, which I think Commissioner Schaefer just addressed as well. You know, who's actually in charge if you have an honorary chair and a facilitator. But Commissioner McDaniel, to your point, you know, I can see both sides of this issue. I still tend to agree with Commissioner Garcia that ex officio is okay. My concern is that we're treating this differently from all the other stakeholder processes. However we come down on this issue, I think we should be consistent. So we just had ex officio members on the wildlife area pass working group. That's the only one I've experienced in my term here. And now we have the wolf and we're gonna exclude commissioners. But I think we should have one rule for all of these sort of proceedings that we get involved in.
Well, we could go through some history on that before I go to the next commissioner. We've had working groups without commissioners on them before. It's kind of dependent on the situation and topical matter. So I'm not sure that we'll be able to give you that consistent answer you're looking for, Commissioner Touchton. I'm going to jump over you, Charlie, since you were kind of on the mic a couple times already, and get to a couple others, and then I'll come back to you, and then we'll have to close this out. Commissioner Blecka.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to make the point that this is a ballot initiative. This was ballot driven. It's not a traditional situation that we're in. You know, when we reference the State Wildlife Area Working Group, that was generated within our agency from our commission. This is a ballot initiative that we've been given direction to handle, and I think it needs to take the maybe say a non-traditional route with us staying out of it, because it's a ballot initiative and not generated from within the agency. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Blecka. Commissioner Hauser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did want to tag the honorary chair concept. I don't know that we've gotten into that in great detail, other than I will either take blame or praise, whichever it might be, for maybe this idea. And that is, I would certainly recommend, and I've seen this work, and others that are on the line, Dan Gibbs and others who've seen honorary chairs work really well for referendum C and some major issues. And it's a place where I think, you know, some very well-respected, you know, can be 2 or 3, whatever it is. It can represent, you know, sort of the Front Range, the Western Slope, people that are really well regarded. I think it gives the process integrity. I think if we do that well, and that is a diverse sort of, however many that is, it brings.
You work for us or DNR?
Sorry, Dan, you're on the mic. Prenslow. So I would advocate for this. And I think there's been lots of examples in the state of Colorado where facilitators worked very closely with those honorary chairs. And that role is very clear. And the role of the facilitator is very clear. The role of the commission is very clear. And the role of the committees is really clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hauser. Commissioner Garcia.
I would defer to Commissioner Greenberg first, please.
Okay. Good morning, Kate. Good to see you. And you have the floor.
Morning. Thank you, Commissioner McDaniel and Commissioner Garcia for yielding. Apologies for broadband issues, but I've been really grateful for the conversation this morning, and always feel the responsibility with my commissioner of the Colorado Department of Agriculture hat, in addition to my role here, but primarily to say that CDA, the Department of Ag, of course, remains a partner. We have staff who are committed to being in the communities that are going to be most impacted as we think through what the nuance of this framework is going to look like. So just, I don't want to take us off course with the very specific nature of this discussion right now, but did want to be sure I had the opportunity to say that myself and our team will continue to, on the CDA side, of course, represent agriculture and landowners, particularly those most impacted. However, we can be at the table and support other voices to gain access to this process. That is front and center for us, given the public comment we've all received, the thoughtfulness of the commission. There's of course so much work ahead. We're here with you. With that, I would want to return back to the specifics of this conversation and appreciate the thoughtfulness, but just want to be sure it had a chance to comment in that way. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Greenberg. Commissioner Garcia, your final thoughts?
Very quickly, yes. On the honorary chair, I want to thank Commissioner Hauser for bringing that idea forward. I think it is a good idea. I think the most important part is just defining that role versus facilitator and make sure that those roles are very clear and distinct. I will real quickly go back to the ex officio member of the commission, and honorably, Chairman McDaniel, I'm going to disagree with you in not allowing that person, if we have such a person, to be able to then vote. I think we'd have to change our bylaws, first of all, to make somebody ineligible for voting at a commission meeting. And I've been on lots of boards and commissions, both statewide and nonprofit, and seen working groups and special committees with members from the board or commission on those, and they all come back and vote. And the idea that that person might have more knowledge supports the idea that we would all go back and watch these videos of the meetings anyway. If we did that, then we'd have to question every commissioner before every vote. Did you watch those videos or did you not? If you did, then you can't vote. Kind of idea. To me, it makes no sense. And so I will again vote for having an ex officio member, and that person would vote at the full commission meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Well, Reed, I think you heard we have a majority in how they feel, but it's also a divided group, but hopefully we've got the input to move forward. And with regards to this topical matter, I think you wanted to talk about the application process for the SAG before we finish.
Yeah, and I appreciate Commissioner Hauser taking one of my topics for me, so I appreciate that too.
Sorry, I thought we were going to public comment. I was out of order on that. Forgive me.
Oh, I appreciate it. But yeah, with the stakeholder advisory group, the major point of that conversation is we've heard that there's a desire to have other members on that group, that we missed the mark with the number of people that we put on there, well, on maybe both the groups. I just would remind everyone that the listing was may. It said it may include these groups, and that we're definitely open to that adaptive approach of adding groups. And really the more important part of it is who is employed into those groups, and not necessarily exactly who they represent, because I know myself, I could probably fit into 3 or 4 of those categories. Not that I'm going to be on a group, but just as a reference to somebody like that. I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you want to open it up to discussion about other groups that we should add or things like that. But the last comment I would make is just to remind the commission that these groups need to stay at a manageable size, and that probably anything over 20 people will just be a very difficult task for the facilitator.
I think anything close to 20 people will be a difficult task. Reed, with that, we have some questions for you or comments. Commissioner Touchton.
Thank you. So I think this is embedded in this topic, but at an earlier commission meeting, I think Commissioner Adams brought up the idea of whether or not we can provide a stipend for participants in these groups. And I know we discussed it, and I think the answer was we'd never done it before. I think to get diversity of representation, that we really might want to look at providing a stipend. These sound like some pretty extensive processes. And I'm worried that if everyone has to do this as a volunteer, we'll limit ourselves to people who have a professional employment with a trade association or an environmental group, and they're on salary and they can show up at all these things, or people who are of better means or economically motivated. But just by not providing a stipend, we might exclude folks from the stakeholder group. So I'd just like to throw that topic back out there, that we address it at some point before we get too far down the line.
Thank you, Commissioner Touchton. Commissioner Hauser.
I don't know if Reed, Reed, were you going to respond to that quickly before I jump in, or?
Well,
Sorry,
yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry. I was hoping, we are way over time, Commissioner.
Okay.
Hauser. If we
I can be quick. Yeah.
And then get Reed to kind of give us a batch of answers, because
sure. Okay.
otherwise we're getting public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is, I've offered my feedback on this, which this may be the place where we can potentially oversample the Western Slope, whether that's Congressional Districts 3 or those counties which are particularly impacted by this. So I would just throw that in. And in terms of compensation, there's plenty of templates out there. I've served on 2 Blue Ribbon Commission on Healthcare Reform and the Women's Vote Commission recently. Those were ad hoc. They were both, if you incurred any, direct expenses, there's plenty of templates and models for this. So I think the state can help us do this if, Reed may be prepared to respond to that, but I agree with compensating those that would need compensation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hauser. Commissioner Schaefer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In the comments that we've received as commissioners, I've seen a number of comments from counties in regards to their representation. I know that that isn't necessarily captured in the examples provided thus far. And so I was just wondering, what is the thinking in regards to how counties will be involved in this process, either through the process that we're discussing today, or if there's something separate that is being considered? Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Schaefer. Commissioner Adams.
Yes, hello.
I think you're on mute, Commissioner Adams. There you are.
Still? Hello?
No, you were just breaking up.
Oh, okay.
We've got you now.
Excuse me. I am actually, and I'm not sure what our commission role is as it relates to the financial implications of all of the things that we're talking about. But I know that fiscal sustainability is one of our strategic goals. And I know when we talked about the initial plan, the process plan that was developed, there was not a budget associated with that plan. And I'm just curious about how we're managing the financial implications of the different processes that we're identifying, specifically related to staff time, in addition to the other staff responsibilities. And again, I know we are not, as a commission, involved in the day-to-day, but I'm curious about just the overarching financial impact of this wolf planning process, just to get to the actual plan, and want to just make sure, again, this can be not a parking lot for maybe our finance committee or others, to going back to our goals and interests around transparency. How are we communicating the fiscal impact of this process to the public, and how impactful is that to the other issues that we had around financial sustainability? So I just wanted to raise that as a parking lot question. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. So Reed, you have a few questions to answer, and hopefully you'll be able to, you've captured all those.
Yes, do you want answers to those now, or would you like to address those later at another meeting?
Well, it depends how fast you think you can answer them, Reed. I don't think I'll be able to take any more comments. We are at 11:28. I think we can run about 10 minutes over on public comment. So if you think those are more extensive, let's run to public comment.
I can provide an answer to the first one, and then the other one, maybe we need to put in a parking lot. So as far as the stipend idea, I'm getting notes here from Katie Lanner and Jeff Verstig that yes, they have budgeted for that expense, and as well as travel reimbursement for members of these groups. We do expect the commitment to be substantial, at least a meeting a month, if not more, depending on the speed and topic being discussed. As far as Commissioner Adams' question, I think I need to defer that to Justin Rutter, as that's more in his shop, and I would just be giving guesses at this time.
Oops. Thank you very much, Reed. I think that concludes this agenda item. So let's move on to public, or at least the staff portion. Let's move on to public comment. Katie, if you're ready, I'm going to allot about 10 minutes or a little bit more than that. So maybe what we could do is we just need to encourage all of our speakers to be as brief as possible so we can capture as many speakers as possible.
Sure. So we were going to start with our elected officials. We have 2 county commissioners who've signed up. We were going to give them additional time. So I guess I'll just look to you, Chair, to manage that. If we give up the 5 minutes, I can still give a warning at 4 minutes.
Yeah, why don't we make it 3? And so we can get some additional speakers on, please. Thank you.
All right, great. So we'll start with Commissioner Borer. Are you there, Tony?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Would you like your camera on?
Yeah, if I could.
Sure. You may have to hit accept on your end.
Yep. There you go.
Yep, go ahead.
Good afternoon, commissioners. I am Moffat County Commissioner Tony Booyer, speaking on behalf of my county. Thank you for considering how to meet the requirements of Proposition 114. As a county commissioner, I like most hear comments regarding Proposition 114 every single day, and I want to share maybe a few things with you guys. Not that you haven't heard them before, but maybe just reiterate a few things. You are mandated, according to Proposition 114, to put the nail in Moffat County's economy. When the power plant was built almost 50 years ago, our economy was told that it did have a lifespan, and we have benefited from that for many years on high-paying jobs, large tax bases for over 50 years. Then the anti-coal legislation came, and the policies entered into our country and into our state, and we saw that threat surface to our major employers and tax the power plant and the coal mines. We saw the writing on the wall, knowing the end was in sight. But we were comforted knowing that our traditional economy of ranching and hunting would still be there to help keep our economy alive. We have always held ranching and hunting as a reliable economy in the midst of our forever changing coal economy. Long came out of the state monies, the interest to pass Proposition 114, the agriculture and hunting economies that have stood the test of time and politics are now at risk. Moffat County asks that each of you in the decisions of Wolf Management Plan defer to those of us who know our economy and our community best and work with us to help minimize the impacts of that. All that we have left are ranching and hunting economies. We have sent letters and have heard nothing from CPW or the commission to be a part of this. And so we ask you to safe harbor protection that our ranchers and our hunters, that they take this point home, that the wolf plan must not penalize a rancher for protecting his livelihood from wolf attacks. And because I was planning on 5 minutes, so I will cut this short. Moffat County asked for a commitment from Wildlife Commission to oppose any efforts to list the wolf as endangered species after introducing them back into Colorado occurs. So most importantly, we're asking to be a part of this process, not just one that can comment like we are today, but to be actually in the roots of this plan moving forward. Thank you for your time and hope you will consider our requests. I appreciate it.
I apologize, I was on mute. Thank you, Mr. Boer. I appreciate your comments. And the only thing I'd let you know is, obviously, if you've been listening today, we're very early in the process. Appreciate your patience with regards to that. And I think if you had heard our discussion of the last couple hours, you see there's a lot of strong commitment by every commissioner to involve the folks on the Western Slope or anywhere that's going to be affected by this. And I'm sure that you all will get a chance and an opportunity and a seat at the table. So thank you very much. Katie?
Next, we have Commissioner Mike Sampson. Commissioner, are you there?
Yes, I am. And you can go ahead and show my face. I'm not much to look at, but go ahead.
All right, you may have to hit accept on your end. There you go. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Welcome, Mike.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. I think you're running a tight ship there. applaud you and give thanks to all the commissioners for their time, their effort, and their service. You're doing a good job. It's tough, and it's a tough job. Good morning, commissioners. I'm Garfield County Commissioner Mike Sampson, speaking on behalf of my county. Thank you for thoughtfully considering how to meet the requirements of Proposition 114. As duly elected county commissioners, we're charged with promoting and protecting the health, safety, and welfare of our residents and visitors, many of whom rely on our vast public lands for their livelihood. Context and geography matters here. Please consider the following. The statewide vote barely passed by less than 2% margin, hardly a mandate. Only 13 counties, 20% in the entire state, voted in favor. Only 5 of the 22 counties west of the Continental Divide voted in favor, which only represents 13% of the land mass and only 19% of the population west of the Continental Divide. Why is this important? 80% of the counties, representing 87% of the land mass west of the Continental Divide, voted against WIF reintroduction. We have 4 asks. Number 1, we appreciate and agree with the Commission's 10-1 vote on January 15th in favor of CPW staff plan presented by Reed DeWalt. I'm very impressed with Reed. To take 3 years to thoughtfully develop the plan, which is consistent with what the voters understood. Rumor has it that there is an end-run political effort afoot to ignore your clear vote and push for an aggressive, arbitrary fast track to get the pause on the ground. From the comments I've heard today, that's not necessarily the case, and that's good. Much earlier than the 3 years. Please stay true to your vote and the will of the people, and do not succumb to political pressures.
1 minute.
We call on the governor, DNR, CPA to engage a robust, transparent, meaningful stakeholder process that highly engages with the West Slope counties who are the most impacted to develop the plan. This engagement process needs to occur on the West Slope to face-to-face meetings. To simply regulate these counties to the role of commenter is disingenuous to at best and a divisive tragedy at worst. In the development of the plan, we request that the Wildlife Commission invite specific stakeholders and elected officials from the West Slope affected counties to serve as members of the stakeholder advisory group. We ask the Commission to immediately release the specific locations of where they intend to introduce wolves on the Western Slope in advance of any West Slope takeover. In closing, Garfield County has already been severely impacted by the passage of Senate Bill 181 on the natural gas industry. This is already having a significant impacts on the ability to provide basic public services, education, fire protection, health and human services, healthcare, among many of other areas. The reintroduction of the gray wolf only negatively exacerbates these conditions by directly impacting our wildlife, ranching, hunting, and many other sectors. Please do not exclude us from the development of the plan. Thank you for the opportunity. I read very quickly. I would answer any questions you have or comments that you'd like to talk to me at any time. Doors open. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Sampson, and thanks for your participation and helping me keep our meeting on track today, and appreciate you recognize how difficult that is to do. Anyway, I don't see any questions or comments, but I'm sure we'll see you again. Thank you very much, sir. Katie, can we move forward?
All right, so we'll move to the public comment portion, again, limited to 2 minutes, and I'll give a warning at 15 seconds, and then you'll be muted at 2 minutes. So we'll have Delia Malone first, followed by Terry Fankhauser. Delia, would you like your camera on? Delia, are you there?
Katie, I believe we lost Delia.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Let's go with Terry Fankhauser then. Terry, I see you, and it looks like you're unmuted, so you're ready to go.
Thank you for your time. A comment that I'm unsure about related to the stakeholder and technical groups. I didn't understand if everything was going to be public in their discussions or the group would have some ability for private conversations. The only reason I bring that up is that certainly this process is difficult enough, and we need to We need to allow for freedom of dialogue, personal and professional respect for those individuals to have some ability for private conversation. Maybe some agreed upon overall summary can be made available to the public. As far as the tag group goes, everyone has bias and everyone has labels associated to who they represent, including me. When we talk about educational institution involvement, I think it's important that we have the institution's involvement, not individuals that maintain monikers associated with the institution or actually acting upon their own commentary rather than that of the institution, which is bound by a stronger scientific threshold. And I would encourage CPW as a staff level to be able to manage that and potentially not have them on the tag, but actually ask specific individuals based on their skill area and the support of their institution to provide technical input. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Fankhauser. Good to hear from you again. Katie, can we move to the next speaker, please?
Sure. So next up, we'll have Rhonda Dern, followed by John Murtaugh. Rhonda, would you like your camera on?
Sure.
Just a moment, you have to hit accept. There you are, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Chairman McDaniel and all the commissioners for allowing me to address my concerns with you today. I am Rhonda Dern, and I'm one of the majority of Coloradans who voted to restore the gray wolves to Colorado. I have been an RN in Colorado since 1976, paying taxes here for the past 45 years. As an old nurse, when I smell something isn't right, there's probably something going on. Something just doesn't smell right to me for the CPW Commission to spend a lot of money for an expensive stakeholder group, to hire an outside facilitator, which isn't even required by the law we passed. Stakeholder groups can get bogged down for months or years, lots of money with those of us who may or not have wolves' best interest in mind, in fact, may be trying to obstruct the process. The science behind wolf restoration and coexistence has been established. Why not enlist a group of experts, wolf biologists and scientists who have studied wolf reintroduction for years and who know how to prevent conflict with wolves and livestock? Scientists and biologists could offer conceptually different alternatives, each one explained by the science that public can comment on in public hearings. As a nurse, I would ask you to use a model like the COVID planning process that's in current place now. The COVID panel is comprised of experts that state the science and data on how to approach factual issues and data-based. Our scientists and wolf biologists in a wolf panel could hold public hearings, offer alternatives such as requiring mandatory actions by ranchers to protect their livestock from wolves. And if they don't comply, they don't get paid if wolves kill livestock. And by calling for in-person meetings during a pandemic, I'll say as a nurse, that's unsafe. And in-person meetings should be out of the question right now. Thank you.
Thank you for participating today. Katie, I think we have our last speaker.
Yes, so the chair has decided in the interest of time that we'll take one more speaker. So the next one will be John Murtaugh, who I see is ready to go, and then we'll wrap up. Thank you. Go ahead, John.
Are you there, John? There he is. Welcome, John. Thank you for participating today.
Of course, and thank you, Chair, Commissioners, and Directors Prenslow and Gibbs for this opportunity. My name is John Murtaugh. I'm a representative with Defenders of Wildlife, personally living here in Lakewood. And I want to commend you all for the work you've done to implement Prop 114. We, the voters, have certainly tasked you with a heavy lift, and while I'm certain we will have criticisms, I believe the process has moved admirably thus far. I would like to echo the comments made by Commissioner Garcia and others regarding your presence in the working groups. I would encourage all commissioners to observe these meetings to the extent their commitments allow, as these discussions may provide invaluable to your deliberations on the wolf plan. Where there may be some concern here, I would suggest deference to the hired facilitators' recommendations. Stakeholder engagement is a vital process of any community process, and engaging stakeholders on important decision-making processes leads to stronger partnerships. As you review applications, I ask that you consider the inclusion of stakeholders who represent a wide range of interests and identities from across the state. While those representing outfitting, agriculture, and species conservation are of utmost importance to the process, I would challenge you to consider the perspectives of those Coloradans often left out of the conversation. The Stakeholder Advisory Group would benefit greatly from a body which accurately represents the diversity of Coloradans. On the technical work group, I would simply ask that you consider the inclusion of non-agency academics who may provide valuable scientific perspectives. Finally, I was pleased to see tribal representation identified as a potential inclusion in the work group, and I would encourage the Commission to consider tribal representation in both groups, as well as to consider representation from the Southern Ute and Mountain Ute tribes in the technical work group as sovereign representatives. Thank you once again for your time and your commitment to the conservation of Colorado's wildlife. I look forward to following the process and our continued engagement.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your participation today. With that, I think we are hopefully here at the end of agenda item number 5. That was certainly a lot of good discussion and a lot of good feedback for you, Reed. And of course, you had a couple things you needed to get back with us on. So with that, let's move forward to our last item, agenda item number 6. And Jeff Versteeg has promised me that he was going to help me out with some timing. And this is really a single topic, and that is the duration and frequency of some of these meetings for us to give him a little feedback upon. So are you there, Jeff?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I will definitely save you some time. I'm keenly aware of the precarious position I'm in, standing between you and other engagements that may include, for some of you, even lunch. So unless you have a bunch of questions, I think we can get us out on time. So this agenda item was really talk about how you want to invest your precious time between now and the end of the calendar year on this matter of wolves. And I think the discussion today has made it very obvious that there are going to be many, many hours of time that you can allocate outside of your regular meetings to listening to recordings of educational sessions and listening sessions themselves, and the workings of the Stakeholder Advisory Group, just to name 3. So it's our recommendation that in consideration and respect for your personal lives and your other business lives outside of commission work, that we not add additional days to the calendar of 2021, with one exception I might propose in a moment here. But that instead we try to make the best use of the 2 days that you've blocked out for the meetings during the remaining of the year. The exception to that might be March. You know, we mail the agenda to you on March 5th, so just about 10 days from now or so. And I don't know that we will be able to bring back a wolf topic for that meeting. Given the conversations we've had today, you've helped us move down the road quite a bit. So I'm not sure we'd have anything new to discuss with you in just a week and a half or so, but probably the remainder of your regularly scheduled meetings, we think it's important to prepare for 2 full days so that we could add, half a day, give or take, to this topic. We do expect that there might be some significant progress on a draft wolf plan closer to the end of the calendar year. So I would suggest, if you're willing, that we try now to block out a day in the first half or so of December, just in case we have some things that we want to talk about or roll up our sleeves on. And if you're amenable to that, then what we would have Laura do is send out a doodle poll this week and see if we can find a day in December. I know December is a busy time of year, holidays and all that, but a day that we could just park and protect in case it ends up being needed. It may not at all, but it's better to protect it now if we end up needing it than try and schedule it at the last minute. So my recommendation, to sum up, is that we just plan on 2 full days during your regularly scheduled meetings, with the possible exception of the one next month where we might not be prepared to have a significant wolf item, and then do a doodle poll for a day in December. So that kind of concludes my remarks and recommendations, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that. Commissioner Hauser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jeff. I would say I just generally would concur with your comments. I guess I would also add, that to the extent that we can all really trust staff on this to present to us and to be efficient with our time, again, stating the obvious that we all need to do our homework in the time that we have outside of meetings to become prepared for meetings and to make these as efficient as possible. Asynchronous learning, again, anything that can be posted that we can learn similar to their herd management plans would be helpful. I would also say that if we can discipline ourselves as well, if we're going to add this topic to our agendas, let's also determine what we might not need or what might not be essential on our agendas in the next year or two. And I hesitate to take anything off in terms of some of the really important reports, but I might suggest that Director Prenslow and staff consider, if there's regular reports, maybe those could be done in writing. Again, maybe those could be done asynchronously. Always love to hear from Emily on GoCo and all the things that we hear from. But again, where we're adding time, let's see if there's an opportunity to have some equivalent take things off the agenda. Because even 2 full days for those of us that travel in great distances, that actually ends up becoming more like 2.5 or 3 days. So when we're back in person, if we can really be sensitive to opportunities to travel on that first day and home on that second day, and think about those things as well. And if there are opportunities regionally for us to quote cover on behalf of the commission, maybe this is to Commissioner Garcia's and Touchton's interest in the working groups. I hope that you will let us know and that we can always raise our hand and be available if there are meetings that are happening in our local communities. And then just finally, I would just ask Laura if we could get kind of an updated firm schedule of all these meetings. I have 3 options that are noted on my calendar in September. I think we had option A, B, and C. So if we can clarify those, it helps for planning. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Hauser. Commissioner Touchton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff, I'm a little concerned about us getting our work done. And so I'm kind of relying on staff to make sure we put in the time as a commission to accomplish this task. I'm sympathetic to staff's time, and and I saw that there was an option between adding days to existing commission meetings or having additional new commission meetings. I would defer on that to you guys, but I want us to get our work done. Honestly, I'm less concerned about commissioner time. As I take this is a volunteer job. And if we don't have the time to put in the hours, we shouldn't volunteer. We owe it to the people in the state to get this done. And I really feel that we need to make ourselves available to accomplish that. And I just need guidance on whether we're going to make any progress if we don't add enough time to our schedule.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to address those 2 comments if you'd like.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'll begin with Commissioner Hauser's. Yeah, we have no desire or intent to waste your time at all. We know how important it is to all of you. So March is a real good example. We can't foresee a particular need to talk about wolves at the March meeting, so that will probably end up being a meeting that's a day and a half, and we're not going to pad an extra half day just arbitrarily. And it's the rest of this calendar year. Most of the process is going to be external facing. The staff dealing with the public through listening sessions, with the commission through virtual education sessions that you can watch at your leisure. Working with the advisory groups and the technical working groups. So a lot of that's outward looking, and other than reports back and updates to the commission, which shouldn't take more than an hour or 2 during your meetings, I wouldn't think. I don't foresee every meeting that's scheduled having to be 2 full days, but we just wanted to preserve the option if something would arise that we can't anticipate, that we need a lot of feedback from the commissioner guidance on, that we'd have that opportunity. The commission meetings for the rest of the calendar year are up on your website. The September meeting is the 1st and the 2nd. So those are all locked in now. And Jay, I guess my comments were similar to yours. We're seeing most of the calendar year 21 being external facing at this point, but I wouldn't begin to suggest that it'll be the same in 2022 at all. I suspect you'll have a lot more work before you, once you have a draft plan and we're getting lots of public feedback on it, because that's when I think the commission really needs to roll up its sleeves and help everybody ensure it's the best plan that Colorado can come up with. So I see a lot of that work not occurring until 2022 and perhaps the very tail end of 21.
Thank you, Jeff. Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, Chair. Jeff, I agree. I think the heavy lifting is going to come down the road. I think the idea of a December placeholder, as we know, it's difficult to get this group together. And so if we could maybe move now with that placeholder. May is always a pretty busy meeting, and I hope we're in Grand Junction, but we do have that placeholder for April. If anything came up between March and the May meeting that we felt was absolutely necessary, I think at least most of us have that April meeting down as a placeholder. But again, I agree with you, Jeff. I don't think everything is going to be internal for quite a while until we can get getting some of the work done on the commission. But placeholders are nice. Thanks, Jeff.
That looks like it for comments, Jeff. So I think you've got good direction with regards to that. Have the answers you need?
I do. Appreciate it very much.
Excellent. And I really appreciate you helping me stay on time. Believe it or not, we're 5 minutes ahead now from being 15 minutes behind. So with that, I think we can actually close the meeting and we can adjourn for today. Today's workshop on Wolf Reintroduction Planning for February 24th, 2021 is officially closed. Thank you all.